I think it's quite clear that the way to force onboarding of a CBDC or this type of digital currency system is going to be some sort of crisis, some sort of event. I think the immigration crises, any sort of refugee situation, that's going to be used to push for digital IDs. I think it's just a very easy excuse for them, a way for them to quickly manufacture consent. Because, all these people, we don't know who they are. They could be criminals. They could be anybody. We have to know who everybody is. And it's going to be sold as a way to provide security to the insecurity created by the migrant crisis.
Don't worry, she's going to do the majority of the talking in this show. Just want to introduce myself really quickly. My name is Wade. Welcome to the channel. This is Whitney Webb. She's an investigative journalist, and she is part of a newly released documentary that sheds light on information that we have been researching on this channel for a number of years. So how we're going to do this, I'm going to do my best to follow along with her. I've watched this clip several times already, and I got everything lined up. What I'm going to share with you is articles and information that backs up what she says, because what she gives us is profound. I don't want to spoil anything, but there are a couple of connections to some assets that we follow quite frequently. Let's jump into this.
So I think there's been growing awareness for some time that there's a lot of bipartisan consensus about most of the policies of the U.S. government, like endless war, for example. And some people refer to it as the uniparty. But people also forget that too. And so what a lot of people call this the two-party model, people refer to it sometimes as the left-right paradigm. But I think not a lot of people truly understand how that paradigm works. If you think about it as the left hand and right hand of the establishment, you'll have one of those hands create a problem intentionally, and then the opposing hand comes in and offers the solution. But the solution was always what the establishment wanted, but it's sold as a solution to a problem created by the other side. So it creates the illusion that the opposing force solved a problem, but in reality the problem was manufactured by one hand of the system, and then the solution was offered by the other hand. The man that claims to have created CBDCs is a man from Barbados named Oliver Gale. He created one of the first, arguably the first CBDC project in the Caribbean, and then went on to have a key role in creating the Nigerian CBDC, the e-Naira. So the way the CBDC in Nigeria was set up is that in order to access the CBDC, you have to have a national identification number, which is the Nigerian digital ID project. So you have to have a digital ID in order to be able to access the Nigerian CBDC. And the way they tried to get people to onboard to the CBD system was by essentially cutting off the vast majority of the cash in circulation in Nigeria. And so despite the fact that they created these conditions to coerce people into using the CBDC, the populace resists. And that suggests that the idea of CBDCs being a tool for financial inclusion, the public doesn't seem to believe that, right? In Nigeria, these people that ostensibly suffer from this identity gap, that suffer from financial exclusion, don't want the financial inclusion that they're being offered by the CBDC. They don't see any real benefit. They see it as a tool of the state. And the state in Nigeria and in other African countries where these sort of systems are being rolled out, the governments have abused these systems.
Just wanted to chime in real quick right here. What are the two terms that we hear the most whenever we look into a crypto project? Financial inclusion. She hits on that point quite a lot in this documentary. I'll leave a link to it under this video.
To go after journalists or other people and violate human rights and all sorts of things. So it's not a tool for increased human rights. It's not a tool for increased inclusion. It's inherently exclusionary, and it's a surveillance tool. Well, there's a couple of reasons why I think they'd want to have private banks have like a major role in this digital currency system to come. If there's a private sector entity banking you and managing your money, it's much easier for them to bank you than the federal government. So for example, if the Federal Reserve were to do a direct issue CBDC, it would be harder for them to freeze someone's bank account or debank them in any sort of significant way, as opposed to a private company where you have, for example, precedents where JP Morgan Chase, for example, debanked Dr. Mercola and some of his executives and didn't give any reason as to why. They just said, we can no longer provide you with financial services, no questions asked. That would be very hard to do in the case of a direct issued CBDC. So again, people need to keep in mind that this is a public-private partnership. That's the prevailing model in the United States. The digital dollar in the United States is also going to be a public-private model. You'll have the Fed, the central bank, working with the private banks that own the Fed in the United States. And that will be the partnership between them will be the system. It's not going to be all public. It's not going to be all private. It is a partnership. If the Fed were to do a direct issued CBDC, it would take them a few years to design, experiment, and deploy it. If you're using these existing dollar-peg stablecoins, those are already here. They're already on blockchains. And a lot of those phases that would take the Fed a few years have already been accomplished if you choose to use those. And if you regulate them so that they have to, for example, keep their reserves at the Fed, then you're able to sort of have the same kind of system, but you don't have to go through the process of creating a direct issued CBDC. China, for example, they already have their CBDC. So the U.S. is behind. So to remain competitive, they say, and have a first mover advantage, we should go with the digital dollars that are already here. So that's dollar-peg stablecoins. So one indication the system is being rolled out in this way is looking at the people developing the infrastructure and what type of digital currencies they're supporting. So one of the biggest developers right now of CBDCs is this company called R3 that's backed by some of the biggest Wall Street banks in the world. And they were named by Central Banking Magazine as the CBDC Partner of the Year last year. And then they're developing a litany of CBDCs for countries all around the world. But that's just one part of what they do. They have this thing they call a digital currency accelerator. And the three types of digital currencies R3 develops are CBDCs, stable coins, and tokenized deposits or deposit tokens. And some banks in the US have already rolled out deposit tokens. Citigroup, JP Morgan. JP Morgan actually had a research paper out last year about how CBDCs are inferior to deposit tokens and how deposit tokens are better. So Oliver Gale, who defines himself as the founder of CBDCs, has more recently co-founded a company called Fluent Finance. What Fluent Finance is they attempt to create a trustworthy dollar-peg stablecoin that they call US Plus. And it's sort of framed as an answer to dollar-peg stablecoins like Tether that have been controversial for having opaque reserves.
She is the first woman to bring this up since I brought it up almost 2 years ago. I know you guys remember this discussion. I hadn't been able to find anything else to come out since then. There's a short that I have on this channel that explains the initial relationship, and they only mention details of a test. I have been trying to figure out if this is still in operation. And to hear her say this, after listening to how eloquently she has put everything else, that sealed the deal for me. Sealed it.
So the whole thing
But she ain't the only one.
About US Plus is having trackable reserves in real time and all of this. And so it's an attempt to create a very extremely trustworthy and backed by a consortium of banks, a bank-led US dollar-peg stablecoin. So if the inventor of CBDCs is moving into stablecoins, he probably knows that there's something there. So not that long after the COVID era began and the World Economic Forum started to be
We're going to touch on that really quickly. Need to show you that consortium behind that Fluent Finance stablecoin is USDF. And you can see these are some notable banks in the United States that are behind this. Recently, and I have it up here, USDF consortium launches to enable banks to mint USDF stablecoins. They were just in the news. In May, stablecoin hearing, USDF deposit token consortium calls for a level playing field for banks. Everything she is saying is hitting on all cylinders.
At, scrutinized more, particularly by independent media. People had noticed the overlap between the World Economic Forum and Event 201, for example, in the COVID crisis. And so during the COVID crisis, people paid a lot of attention when the World Economic Forum launched its cyber polygon simulations that were about cyber attacks. And during that same period of time, you had Klaus Schwab the best known face of the World Economic Forum, saying that after COVID, there would be some sort of what he called a cyber pandemic that would have consequences that would make COVID's impact on society seem relatively insignificant by comparison. The cyber attack seems like a very possible scenario because it's a way for the banks to absolve themselves of any role in a financial crisis. It's an easy way to consolidate banks so that only systemically important ones survive the hack. And it could also potentially be a very effective means of onboarding people onto this new digital currency paradigm. So, for example, let's say this cyber attack on the banks takes place, and they say, well, the existing money in your account has disappeared. The hackers took it, but we can return to you the exact same amount of money you had, but it won't be in the dollars you had before. It will be in USDC or this dollar-backed stablecoin, or it will be this token. So you can get an equivalent amount of money back, right, from the money that was stolen from you, but it has to be this new money. It has to be part of this new system.
That is one hell of a way to put that. This cyber polygon issue was fairly new to me. I heard rumors about it. And looking at the list of partners and participants, this resembles the list of partnerships that you would see on a traditional crypto website. IBM has been all over crypto and blockchain for years. Bank, that's Russia's entrance into the crypto sector, always has been. Deutsche Bank, which I saw down here, heavily tied in with crypto and blockchain, same as Qatar. And these countries, these bodies, are very close to only a select group of assets. That's what makes this information so compelling. But she got a little bit more.
There's the potential here for people to steal money from you and then essentially give it back to you, but with new conditions and with a new social contract.
Yeah. You
voluntarily accepted this new system and voluntarily onboarded to this new paradigm, but it's a coercion to an extreme degree. All of your money was stolen, right? And now you can only get it back if you take it in the form of the digital dollars that we approve of, or the CBDC, depending on where you are, Mm-hmm. Digital IDs are not really a separate project from CBDCs and this new digital financial system. And UN documentation and also documentation from the Bank of International Settlements, they very overtly state that CBDCs and digital IDs are meant to go together. And without digital IDs, the CBDC digital finance system cannot exist. One of the reasons it can't exist without that is because of the KYC functionality built into this digital financial system. They have the know your customer protocols. They have to know who you are. And so they want to have your wallet tied to a digital ID and have that digital ID be mapped to your physical ID through the biometric data collection. So there's different efforts to make digital IDs either as NFTs, non-fungible tokens. There's also the efforts of Sam Altman of OpenAI and his WorldCoin project, whereby you scan your iris, you give them the biometric credentials of your eyeball, they give you a unique identifier, a digital ID, and it's inherently tied to a digital wallet. That is the same model the UN is using. They've already implemented it for refugees getting food assistance from the World Food Program. It's called Building Blocks. It's on blockchain. It involves refugees scanning their irises, and in order to buy food or receive their rations, they have...
This is genuinely concerning. And if it annoys you that I'm pausing, you get over it. I've been researching digital ID for a number of years. There was a point when I was in the market where I was actively searching for assets that specialized in this digital ID technology. The more I learn and the deeper I get, the more concerned I am. Because you have to ask yourself a moral question, which really encompasses the point of this entire episode. We are actively investing in these technologies that will support this system. So if you feel as though it's a system that is designed to enslave and control, then you truly have to ask yourself, what side of the knife do you want to be on? I was watching another podcast that has been covering this young lady quite frequently, and he put it like this. I'd rather be on this side in the position to be able to educate people throughout this transition to put them in a position that benefits them and their families. It was a very humble perspective, and I agree with that. Because at this point, individually, that's the best we can do, is to arm ourselves with the proper information. That is why this young woman, her words are going to be all over the internet. And again, you see the site right there, bigpicturewatch.com. We're going to go to it because she's dropping gems. And this is a part of an independent film project, independent journalism, crowdfunded journalism. So I'll leave a link to this under this video. Let's make sure we show our support. But like I mentioned, she wasn't the only one. There's another lady here called Catherine Austin Fitts. Now, I don't want to reveal too much of this documentary, so we're going to speed through it a little bit.
To develop and implement the sustainable development goals or build the infrastructure necessary for it. So they essentially think that your money, actually all their activities, what they say online in some of the countries that have rolled this out, and has been used to facilitate human rights abuses. So it's not exactly as inclusive as they like to claim. It's inclusive in the sense that we want everyone equally included in our new system that we're creating, our new control system, fundamentally. The UN likes to talk about human rights and how this is ultimately a human rights project and things like that, or how it's empowering human rights. But in other documents of the UN, they refer to human rights not as inalienable rights, which is what most people think of when they hear the term human rights. In some of these UN documents, they refer to human rights explicitly as policy tools, or tools that can be used to basically implement, specific things and mechanisms that ultimately give, greater control over really any aspect of your life that they may want to influence. These guys also admit that the digital ID and CBDC is meant to be the same thing, and there's some very illuminating policy documents in this regard. So for example, there's this one UN document called the People's Money, they call it, and it essentially talks about creating a citizen-centric, SDG-aligned digital financial system, which is obviously the system that we've been talking about. And what they say in there is essentially once your savings and your money is onboarded onto the system, they feel that they reserve the right to access and use your funds to develop and implement the sustainable development goals or build the infrastructure necessary for it. So they essentially think that your money is their money.
My name is Catherine Austin Fitts. I'm the publisher of the Solari Report and managing director of Solari Investment Advisory Services. I just published a huge study called The State of Our Currencies. For many decades, the dollar has been the reserve currency. The system is what I would describe as long in the tooth. The central bankers are trying to bring in a new system, but it's not ready to go yet. So they're trying to lengthen the dollar system, and then they're trying to accelerate bringing in the new system. And they have to bring in the new system without anybody quite realizing exactly what it is. Much of the new is being tested and tried and prototyped, and it involves many different industries. I describe the new system as the end of currencies. We're essentially bringing in a new transaction system that will be all digital and essentially end currencies as we know them. The challenge they have is how do you market a system that if people understood it, nobody would want it.
Yes, this was the first time I came across Miss Catherine Austin Fitts. It was around 2022. Documentary was published called Planet Lockdown. It revealed information centered around the lockdowns and the C-19 that you would not see in mainstream media. A year ago, however, she conducted another interview, and we're just going to full screen this one, let it play out, because she mentions where this all starts. All right, now I'm gonna let this ride out for the rest of the video. So if you rocked with us this far, I want to thank you. My name is Wade. Again, if you found value, don't forget to hit that like button. And understand, the reason why I say that if the money is digital, so is the hustle. Clearly, there are forces at play that are trying to make money digital. So that's gonna change how we hustle.
Of course, the way you do that is with a healthcare crisis. So 1998 began, or the fiscal 1998, which really began in 1997, really represented a decision by the U.S. leadership that the existing governmental structures, in their opinion, would no longer work, and they began what I refer to as a financial coup. And what we saw starting in the fiscal 1998 is tremendous amounts of debt issued and then undocumentable adjustments in government accounts, which I would describe as money being moved out of the federal government. So you take up the debt and then you move the money out of the back door. And essentially, since that time, the U.S. government has been in significant violation of the financial management laws and rules, and to the detriment of the sort of economy of the U.S. and really supporting the centralization of the economy of the world. What happened was when the budget deal in 1995 was sort of a last straw effort by the establishment to get the country on a financially responsible basis. And the reality, Taylor, is that the U.S. population, like many populations in the Western world, depended on the subsidy being generated by the federal credit. And and the reality is, in a democracy or in a democratic process, many people vote for the guy who gives them the biggest check. And so the finances were getting further and further away of what we needed to do if we were going to provide for the baby boomers during the retirement years. And unfortunately, I think the establishment, in a fit of frustration, just decided, something? We're going to have a coup d'etat on a just do it basis. We're going to do it through financial mechanisms so no one really notices, and we're just going to take the money. We'll make it look like the money's there, but we'll take the money through the back door. We'll fill the pension funds full of treasuries when we're taking the assets out of the government, and people will be left with their asset as an IOU from a government that's been emptied out.
And in a previous discussion with CHD TV, you stated that from 1998 to 2001, money continued to go missing. In fact, it was $4 trillion that went missing from DOD, Department of Defense, and HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development. I mean, what's really going on here? And there's extensive record of this, right?
So what happened was I had it up to $12 trillion in 2015, again missing from these two agencies. And a professor at Michigan State University heard me talking about the fact that in 2015, sort of the last full year of Obama, the next year being another year of Obama, but the election year, $6.5 trillion went missing at DOD, which was the largest single amount in 1 year. And he heard me talking about it, and he said, this can't be possible. So he went to DOD and checked the financial statements, and lo and behold, it turned out I was right. So he called me, and he said, can I help? And I said, yes. I haven't done a complete survey of all the financial documents and information at these two agencies for the period 1998 to 2015. So perhaps you could. And he and his students got in there. And what they discovered, Taylor, and the report is up at missingmoney.solari.com. It's the first Skidmore report. It was Dr. Mark Skidmore. What they discovered is there was $21 trillion of outstanding Treasury debt on the books of the Treasury and 21 trillion undocumentable adjustments at DOD and HUD. Kind of a remarkable, as I said, debt going up, money going out the back door. Anyway, so since then, we've done a huge amount to document the missing money. In 2018, a policy was implemented by the federal government, by the House and the Senate, Republicans and Democrats, and the Trump White House together agreed by administrative policy called FASB 56 that the U.S. government could keep secret books and not disclose, who was deciding what was secret or what was secret. They could just keep secret books.